Let's talk a little bit about spears. Now, spears are often crowned the king of weapons of the ancient and medieval battlefield, and really for quite good reason. So here are my 3 reasons why spears were just overall excellent weapons. Now, obviously, spears are fundamentally a long, pointy stick. However, we see vast variations of sharp, pointy sticks historically. We see longer, sharp, pointy sticks. We see shorter, sharp, pointy sticks. We see double-ended and distal tapered long, pointy sticks that allow you for use in different instances. We see 2-handed long, pointy sticks. We see 1-handed long, pointy sticks. But fundamentally, it is a piece of wood with typically an iron end and sometimes a butt end. Why did this weapon dominate the battlefield for thousands of years? I'd like to talk about 3 main reasons for that. Firstly, the economics. Secondly, the ease of use. And thirdly, just the sheer effectiveness of these weapons. So what do I mean by the economics of a spear? I mean that this doesn't require that much material to make, which means that it's cheaper and it's also easier to make, especially for people who are purchasing their own arms and armor. You need some wood and a very small amount of metal, as opposed to if you look at other, more higher-end historical weapons, such as swords or poleaxes or different types of larger weapons. The sheer material cost, the economic value of them is far higher. It's far more difficult to produce. A good quality sword is far more expensive for you to actually purchase. Whereas a spear, you need relatively little materials and relatively cheap materials. You have a very small amount of metal on the ends, and you have a wooden shaft. Also historically, especially when we're talking about citizen levies, so from hoplites to even many medieval people, lots of people had spears for hunting, like boar hunting. So a spear is a weapon, it's a multi-tool that can be used in civilian life and also is very effective on the battlefield. And that leaves us on to point number 2, the ease of use of the spear. The spear can be used in a multitude of ways. It can be used in underhand, it can be used in overhand, it can be used one-handed, perhaps with a shield, it can be used two-handed, allow for excellent versatility in that. But fundamentally, it's not a very difficult weapon to use. It doesn't take years to train someone to be able to be adequate using a spear. You don't have to learn loads of different longswording techniques. You have to learn how to stab someone in various different ways, very simply put. But this is a weapon that is typically very easy for mass groups of people to use with relatively little problems. You can just hold it at bay, right? Keeping distance between you and your opponent. You can use it, against men on horseback. Certain spears are very good for trying to stop someone on horseback, keeping them away. You can use it for very quick pokes. But there's nothing particularly difficult that anyone can really pick up a spear and be perfectly serviceable using it. Whereas using a longbow takes years to master. Training to be an adequate sword fighter, a fencer, or any sorts of poleaxe and stuff like that, they're more difficult styles of fighting to learn and master. Which is why we often see the knightly class being very proficient with them, but they also vigorously trained for them. Your average person, who's your average man on the battlefield, doesn't really have the money or the time to buy a sword and learn how to use it properly. So a spear is just far easier for large masses of people to be good enough to field. Can you poke the enemy or keep them at bay? Then you're an adequate spearman. The next answer to why was the spear the king of weapons is just that it is a really good weapon. Okay, it didn't dominate the battlefield. I mean, if you want to get really specific, dominated, prehistoric tribes, right? Use sharp sticks, spears with little rocks and stuff like that. It dominated the battlefield from, the ancient times all the way to the medieval period. Spears and pikes and lances, long pointy sticks dominated the battlefield because they were just very good weapons. They give you an immense amount of reach, something that is really helpful. Can I stab you before you get to me? Well, then I have an advantage, typically, over you. We see some exceptions like the Romans, but still the vast amount of warriors in that period use spears, and many Roman forces, many auxiliary troops still fought with spears. So even in that period, right, the spear, when people often think the sword is sort of the replacement of the spear is still the dominant battlefield weapon. Of course, the ancient Greeks, the spear is the main heart and soul weapon used by the hoplites or the hoplites. Throughout the Viking Age, early, the migration period, spears and axes and smaller weapons like that, easier to uphold. You might already have one for, again, hunting or farming purposes, but also just because they're really effective. Right, up into the medieval period, spears, and heck, we even see them in more modern history, pikes and stuff like that, are just really effective. They're very versatile weapons. You can do a lot with them. You can change grips on them. Again, you can use them one-handed or two-handed. Changes a little bit how you use them. But, fundamentally, they're good weapons. I can parry with a spear very well. I can get a lot of reach with a spear. I can do a little bit of, trickery. I can throw and slide to get extra reach and extra force, right? Works very, very well. The force generated and the speed of a spear is, immensely high. These things were good weapons. They're also easy to maintain and fix. If the spear shaft breaks, you just mount it on a new spear shaft. Or even if it cracks off at the tip, then I can just reattach and have a slightly shorter spear. So field maintenance on spears is relatively easy. They're just very, very versatile weapons. Economically, they're available to a large amount of people. They're not as difficult to produce and as expensive to produce. People don't have to be as well versed and trained with a spear to be a competent spearman as they perhaps do with other battlefield specialized weapons. And they were just overall really, really good. They were good against other infantry. They were good against mounted men. They were, just very well-rounded and good weapons that dominated the human battlefield up until very recently. Do you agree with me? I'd be curious to know your thoughts. Those are sort of three, obviously not the only three reasons, but sort of my main three reasons as to why I think the spear sort of has the rightful title as the king of weapons. I absolutely love spears, okay? Maybe that's my hoplite bias coming through. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please consider checking out our channel memberships and our Patreon page. Massive thanks to our supporters who continue to help the channel out. It really does mean a lot. If you can't afford to do that or don't want to do that, no worries at all. Liking and subscribing is a massive help, and sharing these videos around also helps the channel out a lot. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.